What's up guys and welcome back to the Kamui dimension. Today I want to talk about Isshiki, cause this man might still be alive all this time and he might eventually return to the Boruto story. And this might all be partly Amato's fault. Now, I've actually talked about Isshiki returning to the story in a previous video, but that was focused on the idea of him being brought back due to Amato restoring Kawaki's karma seal. This time, I'm talking about why Isshiki might not have ever died to begin with, contrary to what Momoshiki says to Kawaki. That might sound like blasphemy to some of you, but there are some pretty good reasons to indicate that this could actually be the case, and be sure to watch till the end to see some ways Isshiki might bring himself into the story again. So the first thing I want you to do is watch this scene with Naruto after Momoshiki died from the father-son Rasengan, and then this scene with the Edo Hokage after Black Zetsu backstabbed Madara and revived Kaguya. Notice how the rods pinning down Naruto crumbled away after Momoshiki died, and how the rods in Hashirama and Tobirama crumbled away after Madara was taken over by Kaguya. But now let's look at these panels here with Code and the Ten Tails in chapter 72. Notice how the rods that Jigen put in the Ten Tails still remained pinning it down, even after Isshiki supposedly died. Doesn't that seem strange to you? Why are the rods still there if Isshiki died, when the rods went away when Momoshiki died, and when Madara was taken over by Kaguya?
Seriously? You asked why?
Maybe it's because Isshiki never even actually died. It sounds completely weird, I know, but why else would the rods be there besides plot inconsistency? Before moving forward though, don't be like Isshiki and disappear for several chapters and then randomly come back to the channel months later. Subscribe and turn on your notifications now so I don't end up like Kawaki and become a villain later on. And as a quick side note, I'm aware I'm not the first to point the rods thing out. It's my fault for waiting so long in this video, but by the time this video is live, Kitamaki already made a YouTube short about the rods, and Wiza Nayurenda in the comments also mentioned it to me as well. But don't worry, I'm going to take things a lot farther than just talking about the rods. And this whole thing shouldn't just be Ishiki's soul living inside of Kawaki's karma seal, or Code's karma seal or something, because Momoshiki's soul was still alive inside of Boruto, since he already talked to Boruto and gave him the karma seal, and Madara's soul was still alive inside Kaguya, but their rods still went away. So it would still be inconsistent if it was just something like Isshiki being inside a karma seal, but I mean, I wouldn't be overly surprised if they did something like that. The point though is that the rods are still there, so maybe Isshiki is actually alive. So the next question would be, what on earth could Isshiki have done to stay alive, and when did he do it? I've heard plenty of ideas for how Isshiki could maybe return, but let's start with when Isshiki might have done something. If any of this ends up being true, then I think Isshiki did his thing in this panel right here, when it zooms in on Ishiki's eye right before Kawaki stomps on him and he turns to dust. I've always felt like this shot was important, and I've said this several times on the channel before because it gives the impression that Isshiki did something in this moment here. It's just something you see in manga and anime where they zoom in on the person's eye and that's when they do something. It happens plenty of times. So the question would then be, what on earth did Isshiki do? This man was desperate as hell to stay alive, so he would have been willing to take some drastic measures to stay alive. The first and probably the most likely option is that Isshiki just did the exact same thing he already did in the past with Jigen, where he shrunk himself the last possible split second to either jump in Kawaki's ear and suck on his brain to stay alive, or he shrunk down and teleported to the Ten Tails dimension to suck on the Ten Tails and absorb its nutrients to stay alive since it has a ton of chakra and life force, or to do the same thing but inside of Code's body instead. This would be very in character for Isshiki to do because he's literally done this before as he was dying, so it's nothing new really. And if you're thinking,
Kamui, how on earth could Isshiki have possibly done that in that split second?
I don't know man, you should probably ask Sasuke how on earth he summoned Manda, put Manda under Genjutsu, jumped in Manda's mouth, and then reverse summoned away while being visibly damaged from electrocuting himself and lower on chakra, and he did all this within a split second after Deidara already blew himself up. It's just Kishimoto's plot, man. If he made an ass pull then, he can make an ass pull now. Alternatively, maybe Isshiki made a wish. We know that Isshiki supposedly had this ability to grant wishes, which is what I think is the whole reason why Amato is using Kawaki and giving him back the karma seal and stuff, as I've talked about in the past. But we don't know the requirements for Isshiki to use this ability, what the consequences for it are, or what it can actually accomplish. But we do know that Isshiki had nothing to lose consequence-wise since he was about to die anyway, so he might as well shoot his shot and use it for something if he could, right? And I assume that Ishiki's wish would have been to somehow stay alive and come back to being regular Isshiki in a strong body in some way or another, using either Kawaki's body or Code's body as his vessel. It's hard to say what exactly Isshiki would have wished for specifically since we don't know enough about the ability, but maybe Isshiki wished for his body to just randomly be inside of either Code, Kawaki, or the Ten Tails, and then he'd go from there. Essentially, it would be the same thing as the Sukuna Hikona thing. Regardless of whether Isshiki just shrunk down and teleported to the Ten Tails dimension, which is what I lead towards, or he made a wish, I think the best option is that Isshiki in one way or another is now tied to that Ten Tails, and there's 4 main reasons for that. Number 1 is because that's just the most unique option. It's not rehashing the exact same thing over and over again with the Karma Seal. Number 2 is because this way doesn't get all inconsistent with the rods thing earlier, like I mentioned, where Momoshiki's soul was alive inside Boruto's Karma Seal when his body died, and the rod still crumbled away, and same idea with Madara. So it would still be inconsistent if Ishiki's soul was just dormant inside Kota Kawaki's Karma Seal or something, but not his living body. In this case, Isshiki himself would still be alive, just sucking on the Ten Tails like he did with Jigen. Number 3 is because this could lead to Isshiki returning in a very similar way to how Kaguya was brought back in Naruto Shippuden. And number 4 is because the Ten Tails creatures that Code created by splitting up the Ten Tails and mixing it with his claw marks, which contain Code's DNA, don't really resemble Code at all, but instead they look more like Isshiki or Jigen than anybody else. This would make me think that either the Ten Tails or Code has some of Isshiki inside of them. And yes, Code is still a viable option, but Code himself has no Isshiki characteristics or abilities, so it still seems a little weird for Ishiki's DNA or soul to be inside of Code in that case. Plus there's the rod thing I mentioned earlier. So I kinda just prefer him to be inside of the Ten Tails brain or something like that instead. So now, why would this be beneficial for Isshiki to latch himself to the Ten Tails with his nearly dead, crumbling body?
Why?
You ask, why?
Well, remember what happened with Kaguya's revival? Madara became the Ten Tails Jinchuriki and absorbed the Divine Tree, and awakened the Rinnegan and Rinne Sharingan, and then Zetsu pinned him down and started sucking in a ton of chakra from the people in the Infinite Tsukuyomi. The components for Kaguya's revival were a vessel, which was Madara, the Ten Tails, the Divine Tree, and a lot of chakra and life force from the planet. Now this was done by Madara absorbing the Ten Tails into himself, then later the Divine Tree, and then Madara casted the Infinite Tsukuyomi to bind up almost everyone on the planet, which required Madara to awaken the Rinne Sharingan in order to cast the Infinite Tsukuyomi, which required him to have both Rinnegan in his eyes and fly near the moon. And Zetsu just did the suck up the planet part for Madara. Now an interesting thing about the Ten Tails on Earth was its weird connection with Kaguya, where Black Zetsu says that the Ten Tails isn't just the Divine Tree, but it's also Kaguya herself, in that it wasn't the Divine Tree trying to take back the chakra Kaguya stole from the fruit, but actually Kaguya's will trying to take back the chakra that was dispersed into her 2 children. So it's described kind of weirdly because on one hand it sounds like the Ten Tails is Kaguya, just in a beastly form, and then on the other hand it sounds kind of like Black Zetsu, where it's just Kaguya's will and it's like protecting her. So I don't really know what they were going for, but the point is Kaguya is clearly heavily tied to that Ten Tails, and that's why her soul came with the Geto statue being summoned, and why you needed the Ten Tails to bring her soul back, and she even almost turned into the Tail Beast in her fight against Team 7. And when Hagoromo and Hamura, or Naruto and Sasuke, sealed Kaguya, the chakra from the Ten Tails was sucked out of her, which turned Kaguya and the Ten Tails into the Geto statue, which got sealed on the moon, and Hagoromo split up the Ten Tails chakra into 9 Tail Beasts and blah blah blah. The reason I'm mentioning all of this is because Let's say Code were to eat a chakra fruit using that 10 tails. What makes a chakra fruit? First, you plant the 10 tails, which turns into a divine tree after eating an Isshiki. Then the divine tree sucks up the planet's chakra and life force, and then it pops out a chakra fruit, which contains all that power and DNA. So essentially, what Zetsu did with Madara is the same as eating the chakra fruit. It contains the 10 tails and divine tree, and the chakra and life force from the planet. Zetsu just did it step by step and forcefully, rather than by letting the divine tree do its thing on its own and have someone eat the fruit. And that Earth 10 tails probably ate an Isshiki long ago before Kaguya even ate the chakra fruit the first time. So if Code ate the chakra fruit of the 10 tails that Isshiki might now be tied to, Isshiki might have everything he needs to then revive inside of Code's body with Code as his vessel, just like Kaguya did with Madara, which would then make Code's wish come true to become Ishiki's perfect vessel for revival. Remember, the Karma Seal isn't the only way for an Isshiki to be revived, as we've seen Kaguya do it before using the 10 tails with Black Setsu's help. In this case, Amado would kind of be accidentally fulfilling the Black Setsu role. Code would be like Madara, and Amado would be like Black Setsu, except he's doing it on accident this time, not on purpose. And yes, this could also work if Kawaki ate the chakra fruit as well, but I think it would be cool if Code did it, and then Kawaki had to face Isshiki himself later on, forcing him to surpass Isshiki in order to defeat him. And I know Momoshiki said Ishiki's soul was extinguished, but if Isshiki just teleported away and it looks like he died, it's not like Momoshiki would have known the difference. He wouldn't sense Isshiki in that 10 tails dimension that he doesn't even know the location of, so we would assume he is dead and gone. However, he probably would have noticed Isshiki if he was just inside Kawaki's brain, but who knows? Momoshiki's pretty cocky and ignorant at times. And for those of you who think the smoky Isshiki conversation with Code was the real Isshiki there, this would then explain his instructions he gave to Code, since it would help Isshiki revive himself. However, I still think that was fake anyway, for all the reasons I've talked about in the past several times. Plus, I don't know why Isshiki wouldn't just tell Code that he could revive Isshiki by following these instructions, because that's exactly what Code would have wanted to happen, so he'd literally be even more motivated to carry out Ishiki's will. So I still think that was Amado's doing there, and so if Code succeeds in eating a chakra fruit at some point with his 10 tails, and all this stuff comes true, all of this would actually be a blunder on Amado's part, since he's the one who probably gave Code the instructions to try and eat a chakra fruit, and he probably played a role in Code getting that white Karma Seal, because he didn't realize Isshiki was in the 10 tails and would revive because of his master plan he created to essentially make Kawaki into Isshiki 2.0. And then Isshiki can eventually get his revenge on Amado and kill him just like Isshiki said he would for betraying him. I think that would be pretty cool, and I feel like Isshiki should return to the story since he never really had his character finished out properly. Just like when Delta got shut down randomly, I knew she would return as Amado Cyborg because she simply had to, otherwise her character would be incomplete. Same idea with Isshiki, and same idea with Kashi and Koji right now. And before finishing this video, I want to play devil's advocate and offer some reasons for either Code or Kawaki being a possibility instead of the 10 tails. Starting with Kawaki, well, Kawaki was literally right there, so that's the easiest option. Kawaki was also Ishiki's ideal vessel, and Isshiki may have guessed Amado would restore Kawaki's Karma Seal since he knew Amado was betraying him, which means Isshiki would be inside Kawaki's brain, and Ishiki's Karma Seal is now back on Kawaki because of Amado, which might make Kawaki into a viable vessel again, making it easy peasy for Isshiki now. And this could also explain Kawaki's gradual change in personality lately, which might be due to Ishiki's influence from sucking on Kawaki's brain, just like how Jigen essentially turned into Isshiki in personality when Isshiki did that in the past. But this option wouldn't explain the 10 tails creature's appearances though, or why Momoshiki didn't sense Isshiki inside Kawaki. Now for Code, Isshiki doesn't need to worry about Code betraying him, because Code wants to be his vessel, and the 10 tails creatures bear some resemblance to Isshiki, even though it's Code's DNA that's in the claw marks that were mixed with that 10 tails, so there could be something to that. However, I think Isshiki being tied to the Ten Tails has the most weight to it for those 4 main reasons I mentioned earlier, but I still wanted to mention these as 2 other possible options. But I want to hear what you guys think. Do you think Isshiki will return to the story at some point, and if so, do you think he'll return in a manner similar to this by using the Ten Tails? Or at least, do you think he'll try to return this way anyway? Or do you think he'll return in a different way or not return at all? And do you think this is how Amato could be like our Black Setsu character? Same idea, but on action this time. Let me know in the comment section below, but that's a wrap on today's video, so thank you guys for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!